Have you ever had someone try to tear down your dreams? Someone so close to you that their betrayal cuts deeper than any strangers ever could? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Nathan Reed, and 3 years ago, my uncle, a man I once looked up to, told my entire family that I was nothing but a fraud, a con artist playing pretend, in an industry I had no business being in. They believed him, every last one of them. My calls went unanswered. Holiday invitations disappeared. The family that once supported me through everything suddenly acted like I didn't exist. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It lights a fire that nothing can extinguish. This is the story of how I went from family outcast to standing on a national stage, accepting an award that changed everything, and the bittersweet victory that came with it. Growing up in Riverdale, Michigan, a town so small it barely registered on most maps, I never imagined I'd end up where I am today. My childhood home was a modest 2-bedroom house that my parents had stretched their finances thin to afford. Dad worked at the local automotive plant, and Mom managed the town's only pharmacy. We weren't poor, but we were far from wealthy. My Uncle Richard, my father's older brother, was different. He had left Riverdale at 18 and built a successful architectural firm in Chicago. Every time he visited, it was like royalty had descended upon our humble town. He drove luxury cars, wore tailored suits, and always brought extravagant gifts that made my parents' contributions seem insignificant by comparison. One day, when you're serious about making something of yourself, I'll show you how it's done, he would tell me with that practiced smile of his. The Reed name means something in my circles. Despite his condescension, I idolized him. While my father was a man of few words who expressed his love through consistency and hard work, Uncle Richard was charismatic, commanding attention in every room he entered. As a shy, creative kid who spent more time with sketchbooks than with other children, I wanted nothing more than to be just like him. Art has always been my escape. When I wasn't in school or helping my parents around the house, I was drawing, painting, or sculpting with whatever materials I could find. My early works were crude, misshapen clay figures and watercolors that bled beyond their intended boundaries, but there was something in them that caught people's attention. My high school art teacher, Ms. Calloway, was the first to see genuine potential in my work. She stayed after hours to teach me techniques beyond the standard curriculum and entered my pieces in regional competitions without telling me until I had already won. "You have a unique perspective, Nathan," she told me during my senior year. "Don't let anyone convince you that art isn't a viable path." But when I announced my intention to study digital animation at college, my family's reactions were mixed at best. My parents were supportive but concerned about job prospects. Uncle Richard was less diplomatic. "Animation?" he scoffed during a family dinner. "That's not a career, Nathan. That's a hobby. Creative types are a dime a dozen, and most of them end up serving coffee to people with real jobs." My father defended me, which led to one of many heated arguments between the brothers. These confrontations always ended the same way, with Uncle Richard reminding everyone of his success and my father retreating into wounded silence. Despite the discouragement, I enrolled at the California Institute of Digital Arts on a partial scholarship. The remaining tuition was steep, and my parents couldn't afford to help much. I worked 2 part-time jobs while maintaining a full course load, often surviving on vending machine snacks and 4 hours of sleep. The program was intensely competitive. Of the 60 students who started, only 38 graduated. The workload was crushing. Endless hours learning software, studying anatomy, mastering timing and weight and movement. My first-year projects were mediocre at best, but I improved rapidly, fueled by determination and an almost obsessive dedication to proving my worth. By junior year, my work began to stand out. I developed a distinctive style that blended traditional, hand-drawn techniques with cutting-edge digital tools. My thesis project, a 7-minute animated short about a lighthouse keeper who discovers a wounded sea creature, caught the attention of several faculty members. Professor Eliza Martinez, a former lead animator at Pixar, took a particular interest in my development. "You have something special, Nathan," she told me after reviewing my portfolio. "But talent alone won't get you where you want to go in this industry. You need connections, and you need to be in the right place at the right time." She recommended me for an internship at Horizon Animation Studios, a mid-sized company known for its innovative commercial work and indie projects. The position was unpaid, but it was a foot in the door that countless aspiring animators would kill for. I called my parents immediately after receiving the offer. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, her voice tight with what I recognized as both pride and worry. "But how will you afford to live in San Francisco without income?" It was a valid concern. The internship would consume 40 hours each week, making it impossible to maintain my current jobs. San Francisco's cost of living was notorious, and my savings were practically non-existent after years of tuition payments. "I'll figure it out, Mom," I assured her with more confidence than I felt. This is my chance. The next weekend, during a family gathering for my grandmother's birthday, I shared the news, hoping for congratulations and perhaps some advice from relatives who had successfully navigated professional transitions. Most of my family offered perfunctory congratulations, immediately followed by practical concerns about finances and stability. Uncle Richard, however, had a different reaction entirely. "Horizon Animation?" he said, setting down his drink with exaggerated care. "Never heard of them." "They're respected in the industry," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "They've won several awards for their commercial work, and they're expanding into feature-length projects." "Awards," he repeated with a dismissive wave. "Participation trophies handed out by other creative types to make themselves feel important. Let me guess, unpaid internship?" I nodded reluctantly. "So you'll be getting coffee and making copies for free and calling it a career milestone." He laughed, looking around to make sure others were appreciating his wit. "At least when you were in school, you were working toward a degree. This is just exploitation dressed up as opportunity." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Rich, not now. It's Mom's birthday." "I'm trying to save the kid from wasting more time," Uncle Richard insisted. "Nathan, I can make a call tomorrow and get you an entry-level position at my firm. Real work, real pay, real future. What do you say?" Before I could respond, my cousin Melissa, Uncle Richard's daughter who had followed him into architecture, chimed in. "Dad's right, Nathan. I was making 6 figures 3 years out of college. How many animators can say that?" The conversation devolved from there, with various family members weighing in on the practicalities of my chosen path. By the end of the evening, what should have been an announcement of good news had transformed into a referendum on my life. Choices. Despite the discouragement, I accepted the internship and moved to San Francisco 2 weeks after graduation. My new home was a converted garage I shared with 2 other interns from different companies. The space was barely legal as a dwelling, with unreliable heating and a persistent mold problem, but the rent was the lowest we could find within commuting distance. The internship was everything I had hoped for and more challenging than I had anticipated. Horizon's creative director, Marcus Chen, was a perfectionist who expected interns to perform at the level of seasoned professionals. My first few weeks were a brutal adjustment, with frequent criticism and occasional all-nighters to meet impossible deadlines. "Your technical skills are solid," Marcus told me during my first performance review, "but your work lacks boldness. You're playing it safe, following conventions instead of pushing boundaries." His words stung, but I recognized the truth in them. Years of having my artistic ambitions questioned had made me cautious, afraid to take the creative risks that might set my work apart. I threw myself into improving, volunteering for the most, challenging aspects of projects and studying the techniques of animators I admired. The other interns began to resent my intensity, mistaking dedication for brown nosing. 4 months into the internship, an unexpected opportunity arose. Horizon had landed a contract to create an animated sequence for a major tech company's product launch, and the timeline was impossibly tight. With several senior animators out with a seasonal flu, Marcus reluctantly assigned me to handle a 15-second transition sequence. I worked 3 days straight, barely sleeping, pushing beyond anything I had created before. When I finally submitted the sequence, I was too exhausted to worry about Marcus's reaction. The next morning, I was summoned to the conference room where the entire creative team was gathered. "Nathan's sequence," Marcus announced, playing my work on the large screen. "This is the level of innovation I've been asking for." The room was silent as my animation played, a fluid, almost impossible transition that made technology feel organic and alive. When it ended, several team members applauded. "We're using this as the cornerstone of the entire presentation," Marcus continued. "And I'm offering Nathan a junior animator position, effective immediately." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Just like that, my life changed. The salary wasn't extraordinary, but it was enough to move into a small studio apartment of my own. More importantly, I was officially part of the industry I had fought so hard to enter. I called my parents that evening, barely containing my excitement as I shared the news. "We're so proud of you, Nathan," my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father wants to tell everyone we know." "Will you come for a visit?" I asked. "I can show you the studio, and San Francisco is beautiful this time of year." There was a pause before my father spoke. "We'd love to, son, but things are tight right now. The plant is cutting hours, and your mother's store might be closing with that new chain pharmacy opening up." The revelation was like a bucket of cold water. While I had been focused on my own struggles and triumphs, my parents had been facing their own challenges. "I can help," I offered immediately. "My first paycheck." "Absolutely not," my father interrupted firmly. "We're fine, Nathan. This is just temporary. You focus on building your career." After we hung up, I sat in my empty apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes, feeling a complex mix of pride and guilt. My success felt hollow, knowing my parents were struggling. I threw myself into work, taking on additional projects to impress Marcus and secure my position at Horizon. Within 6 months, I was assigned to the core team for an independent animated film the studio was producing alongside its commercial work. The Lighthouse Keeper's Song was a passion project for many at Horizon, a melancholy, beautiful story about isolation, connection, and the healing power of creativity. By coincidence, it shared themes with my thesis project, and Marcus assigned me to lead the character animation for the protagonist. Working on a feature-length film was exponentially more demanding than anything I had done before. The schedule was relentless, the standards impossibly high. I regularly worked 16-hour days, fueled by convenience store coffee and the fear of letting down the team. My social life became non-existent. Friends from college stopped reaching out after too many canceled plans and unanswered messages. The few dates I attempted ended awkwardly, with potential partners put off by my exhaustion and preoccupation with work. Even during rare, free moments, my mind was filled with animation problems to solve and sequences to refine. A year into production, the film caught the attention of the animation industry when Horizon released a 2-minute teaser. Animation blogs and social media accounts shared the clip widely, praising its distinctive visual style and emotional depth. Much to my surprise, my name was mentioned in several articles as one of the rising talents behind the project. I sent these articles to my parents, seeking their approval and hoping to reassure them that my unconventional path was yielding results. They responded with enthusiastic support, as they always had. What I didn't expect was for the news to spread throughout my extended family. During the annual Reed family reunion, which I had skipped due to production deadlines, my online recognition apparently became a topic of heated discussion. According to my cousin Jake, who called me afterward, Uncle Richard had been particularly vocal. "You should have heard him, Nathan," Jake said. "He was telling everyone that these animation blogs are just hobby sites run by amateurs, and that anyone can get mentioned on them if they know the right people. He said you were exaggerating your role at Horizon to make it sound like you're more successful than you actually are." I felt a familiar mixture of hurt and anger. "What did my dad say?" Jake hesitated. "He tried to defend you at first, but Uncle..." Richard brought up an article about animation being a struggling industry with massive layoffs. He made it sound like you're on the verge of unemployment and too proud to admit it. "That's completely false," I said. "Horizon is growing, and I just got a raise last month." "I believe you," Jake assured me. "But you know how Uncle Richard can be. He's convincing when he wants to be, especially with the older relatives who don't understand the creative industry." After the call, I considered reaching out to clear the air but ultimately decided against it. I had a crucial deadline approaching, and engaging with Uncle Richard's negativity would only distract me from the work that actually mattered. Little did I know his comments at the reunion were just the beginning of a campaign to discredit me within the family. Over the following months, as the Lighthouse Keeper's song progressed toward completion, subtle changes occurred in how relatives interacted with me. My holiday card list shrank. Invitations to family events became less frequent. When I did speak with extended family members, there was an undercurrent of doubt in their questions about my work. "Are you still at that animation place?" my aunt would ask. "Richard mentioned they've been having financial troubles." Or my cousin, "Do you have a backup plan? I heard the whole industry is moving overseas." It was death by 1,000 cuts, not outright rejection, but a persistent undermining of my accomplishments and choices. The most painful part was seeing how it affected my parents, who found themselves defending me at every family gathering, only to be met with pitying looks and well-meaning but condescending advice. The isolation from my family grew more pronounced as the Lighthouse Keeper's song entered its final production phase. The irony wasn't lost on me, working on a film about loneliness while experiencing it firsthand. By the time we reached the post-production stage, I had stopped mentioning my family issues to coworkers, focusing instead on pouring my emotional turmoil into my work. Marcus noticed the change in me. After a particularly grueling session finalizing a critical sequence, he invited me to grab coffee at the small cafe across from the studio. "Your animation has evolved," he said, studying me over his espresso. "There's a rawness to it now, especially in the scenes where the lighthouse keeper confronts his past. It's compelling, but I'm concerned about the toll it's taking on you." I stirred my coffee absently. "Is it affecting the quality of my work?" "Quite the opposite. But great art shouldn't come at the expense of the artist's well-being." He leaned forward. "Look, Nathan, I've been in this industry for 20 years. I've seen talented people burn out because they didn't establish boundaries. I'm fine." I insisted automatically. Marcus gave me a skeptical look. "When was the last time you took a day off? Called a friend? Visited family?" The question hit harder than intended. "My family situation is complicated right now." "Ah," he nodded with understanding. Family drama, the universal constant. For some reason, perhaps exhaustion, perhaps the genuine concern in his voice, I found myself telling Marcus about Uncle Richard's campaign against me, the growing distance with extended family, and the financial struggles my parents were facing back in Michigan. "Your uncle sounds like a piece of work," Marcus commented when I finished. "But here's something I've learned. People who try to tear others down are usually terrified of their own inadequacy. Your success threatens him." "What success?" I laughed bitterly. "I live in a shoebox apartment, work insane hours, and can't even afford to help my parents." You're 30 years old and a key animator on a project that's generating industry buzz. That's success by any reasonable definition. Marcus finished his coffee. And speaking of success, I wasn't going to share this until the team meeting. Tomorrow. But The Lighthouse Keeper's song has been accepted to the animated feature category at the Anderson Film Festival. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. The Anderson was one of the most prestigious independent film festivals in the country, known for launching careers and securing distribution deals. That's incredible, I managed. It gets better. Festival screenings begin next month and there's early talk about award nominations. Marcus smiled at my stunned expression. The studio is sending a small team to represent the film. I want you to be part of it. The opportunity was extraordinary. A chance to witness firsthand the audience reaction to our work, to network with industry leaders, to potentially stand on stage if the film won an award. Yet my first thought was of my parents. The festival is in New York, right? Could I bring guests? I asked, already calculating whether I could afford plane tickets for my parents on my limited savings. 2 guest passes per team member, Marcus confirmed. The studio covers accommodations for staff only, but your guests are welcome at all events. That evening, I called my parents with the news. Their excitement was genuine and heartwarming. "We're so proud of you, honey," my mother said. "Your father is already telling the neighbors." "I want you both to come to New York for the festival," I said. "The film might win an award and I can get you passes for all the events." There was a brief silence before my father spoke. "Son, that sounds wonderful, but I've already checked flights," I interrupted, anticipating his concern. "I can cover everything. Please say yes. This is important to me." After some gentle persuasion, they agreed. For the first time in months, I felt a surge of pure joy. Whatever Uncle Richard had been saying about me, my parents would soon see my name in the credits of a film screening at a major festival. They could return to Michigan with tangible proof of my success to counter any lingering doubts in the family. The weeks leading up to the festival were a whirlwind of preparation. The studio arranged media training for those of us representing the film, teaching us how to handle interviews and red carpet questions. We received detailed itineraries, dress code guidelines, and contact information for industry representatives interested in meeting with us. Meanwhile, I was coordinating my parents' travel arrangements, booking their flights, and a modestly priced hotel near the festival venue. Money was tight. I had to dip into my emergency fund to cover everything, but it would be worth it to share this moment with them. 3 days before we were scheduled to leave for New York, my mother called. Her voice sounded strained, and I immediately knew something was wrong. "Nathan, I hate to do this, but we can't make it to the festival." My heart sank. "What happened? Is everything okay?" "Your father's back went out at work yesterday," she explained. "The doctor says he needs complete bed rest for at least a week. He can barely move, let alone travel." "I'm so sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely concerned. "Is there anything I can do? Should I come home instead?" "Absolutely not," my mother replied firmly. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your career. You need to be there." "But I wanted you to see." I stopped, unsure how to express the complicated mix of pride and validation I had been seeking. "We know how talented you are, Nathan," she said gently. "We don't need to see your name on a big screen to believe in you." After we hung up, I sat on my bed staring at the confirmation emails for their now useless plane tickets. The disappointment was crushing, not just for the lost opportunity to share my professional milestone with them, but for the realization that my family division would continue unchallenged. On impulse, I called my cousin Jake, one of the few relatives who had consistently supported me. He was surprised to hear from me, especially with such short notice, but after hearing about my parents' situation, he agreed to use their festival passes. "I've always wanted to see New York," he said, "and it'll be cool to tell everyone I knew you when, after you're all famous." Jake's enthusiasm lifted my spirits somewhat, but as I packed for the trip, a nagging sense of unfulfillment persisted. I had been counting on this festival to validate my choices in the eyes of my family, particularly those influenced by Uncle Richard's skepticism. Without my parents present, that validation seemed hollow. The New York trip began on a somber note. While the rest of the Horizon team was bubbling with excitement during the flight, I found myself mentally rehearsing conversations with Jake about which relatives had been saying what about me. It wasn't until we checked into our hotel in Manhattan that Marcus pulled me aside. "Whatever's going on in that head of yours, park it," he advised. "This weekend isn't about family drama or proving yourself to skeptics. It's about celebrating the incredible work we've all done. Be present for it." His words were a needed reality check. That evening, at the festival's opening reception, I made a conscious effort to engage with the moment, to appreciate the surreal experience of being surrounded by filmmakers whose work I had admired for years, to savor the congratulations from strangers who had seen our film's trailer and were excited to view the full feature. Jake arrived the following morning, wide-eyed, at the festival atmosphere and the glimpses of film industry celebrities. Having him there, someone who had known me since childhood, helped ground me in the midst of the surreal experience. "This is insane," he whispered as we entered the theater for our film's premiere screening. "I can't believe you're part of this." Watching The Lighthouse Keeper's Song with a full audience was an entirely different experience from viewing it in the studio. Every laugh, every gasp, every emotional response validated the countless hours we had poured into the project. When the credits rolled and my name appeared, the audience burst into applause. Jake nudged me, grinning proudly. The Q&A session afterward was even more affirming. Critics praised the film's distinctive animation style, particularly the character work, my area of responsibility. One reviewer specifically mentioned the emotional authenticity of the lighthouse keeper's expressions, asking how we had achieved such nuance. Marcus gestured for me to take the microphone. Nervous but buoyed by the positive reception, I explained our technical approach while emphasizing the emotional underpinnings of the character design. "Animation isn't just about movement," I concluded. "It's about finding the truth in each moment, even when that truth is uncomfortable or complex." The audience's response was enthusiastic, and several industry professionals approached me afterward, with business cards and invitations to connect. Jake witnessed it all, his expression shifting from impressed to awestruck. "Uncle Richard has no idea what he's talking about," he said as we left the theater. "You're the real deal, Nathan." The next evening was the festival's awards ceremony. None of us from Horizon expected to win. Being selected for the festival was already an honor, and the animated feature category included works from more established studios. We attended mainly for the networking opportunity and the experience of being part of such a prestigious event. Jake and I were seated near the back of the ballroom, with the rest of the Horizon team scattered nearby. The ceremony proceeded with the expected blend of heartfelt speeches and industry inside jokes. As the animated feature category approached, I felt a nervous energy building among our group. The nominees for Best Animated Feature are the presenter announced, listing 5 films including ours. Jake gripped my arm tightly. "What if you guys actually win?" I shook my head, unwilling to entertain the possibility. "We're just happy to be nominated. The competition is," and the Anderson Award for Best Animated Feature goes to The Lighthouse Keeper's Song by Horizon Animation Studios. The ballroom erupted in applause. For a moment, I couldn't process what was happening. Marcus was already moving toward the stage, gesturing frantically for the team to join him. On wobbly legs, I followed, barely registering Jake's excited whooping behind me. Under the blinding stage lights, Marcus delivered a brief, gracious acceptance speech, thanking the festival committee and acknowledging the entire Horizon team. Then, to my shock, he added, I'd especially like to recognize our lead character animator, Nathan Reed, whose extraordinary talent gave our lighthouse keeper his soul. He stepped back from the microphone, pushing me gently forward. The audience's expectant faces blurred before me as I gripped the podium. "Thank you," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. "This film is about isolation and connection, about a man who has cut himself off from the world, believing himself unworthy of belonging, until an unexpected encounter shows him otherwise." The personal resonance of those themes hit me anew as I spoke. As animators, we're often solitary creators, but this project taught me that our most powerful work emerges when we're brave enough to be vulnerable, to connect our personal truths to universal experiences. I thanked the Horizon team, my parents, who believed in me when no one else did, and my former professor who had seen potential in my early work. As we left the stage, award in hand, Jake met me with a bone-crushing hug. "That was incredible," he said. And guess what? The ceremony was live-streamed. I texted everyone in the family to watch. My stomach dropped. "Everyone?" "Everyone," he confirmed with a mischievous grin, "including Uncle Richard." The thought of my extended family watching the ceremony, seeing tangible proof of my success in an industry they had been led to believe was a dead end, filled me with complicated emotions. There was vindication, certainly, but also sadness, for the relationships damaged along the way. After the ceremony, my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in months, voicemails from aunts and uncles, social media congratulations from former classmates and distant relatives. Most surprising was an email from my Uncle Richard. "Nathan," it read, "congratulations on your award. It seems I may have underestimated the viability of your chosen field. My door is always open if you'd like to discuss your future plans. Best regards, Richard." No apology. No acknowledgement of the damage he had caused. Just a carefully worded message that allowed him to save face while positioning himself as supportive. Jake read the email over my shoulder and snorted. Classic Uncle Richard. Can't admit he was wrong, but doesn't want to be on the losing side, either. I put my phone away without responding. Tonight wasn't about settling old scores or nursing grudges. It was about celebrating a creative achievement that had required tremendous sacrifice and persistence. The post-ceremony reception was a blur of congratulations, business card exchanges, and champagne toasts. Several studio representatives expressed interest in seeing my portfolio, and a prominent animation director mentioned a potential opening on her next project. Around midnight, as the celebration was winding down, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The New York street was still bustling, taxis rushing past and late-night pedestrians hurrying to unknown destinations. Leaning against the building's facade, I called my parents. My father answered, his voice thick with emotion. "We saw it all. Son, the whole thing. You were magnificent." "You watched the live stream?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from Jake's text. "Wouldn't have missed it for anything," he confirmed. "Your mother's been on the phone nonstop since your speech. Everyone's calling to talk about how proud they are of you." "Everyone?" I couldn't help asking. There was a slight pause. "Well, Richard hasn't called, but his daughter Melissa did. Said she always knew you'd make it big." He chuckled. "Funny how people's memories work." We talked for a few more minutes about the award, the film, and his improving back condition. As we were about to hang up, he added, "Nathan, I hope you know that your mother and I have always been proud of you, award or no award, but it sure is nice to have something tangible to show the doubters." After the call, I rejoined the celebration, inside, finding a new lightness in my steps. The validation I had sought wasn't in the statue we'd received or the industry recognition, satisfying as those were. It was in the simple knowledge that I had stayed true to my passion, despite every discouragement, every doubt, every undermining comment. The next morning, nursing a slight champagne headache, I sat in my hotel room composing a proper response to Uncle Richard's email. Jake was still asleep in the adjacent bed, having celebrated perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. I typed and deleted, several versions ranging from scathing to conciliatory. Finally, I settled on, Uncle Richard, thank you for your congratulations. The animation industry has been challenging but rewarding, and I'm fortunate to have found my place in it. I'd be happy to discuss my experiences with you sometime, though I should mention that I'll be quite busy in the coming months. Our film has attracted attention from several major studios, and I've received some exciting job offers following the festival. Best, Nathan. Every word was true, though perhaps the job offers were slightly exaggerated. The pettiness of the response wasn't lost on me, but after years of having my choices questioned and my accomplishments dismissed, the small victory felt justified. As I hit send, Jake stirred and sat up groggily. What time is checkout? Did I miss breakfast? We've got an hour, and yes, you missed the hotel breakfast, I told him. But there's a great bagel place around the corner. He nodded, then squinted at me. You seem different today, more, I don't know, settled? I considered this assessment. I guess I am. For a long time, I've been trying to prove something. To Uncle Richard, to the family, maybe even to myself. Last night felt like crossing a finish line I've been running toward for years. So what's next? Jake asked, reaching for his phone. Hollywood? Disney? Your own studio? I laughed at his enthusiasm. Next is finishing the project I'm currently on and seeing where that leads. But whatever happens, I'm done seeking validation from people who were never going to give it anyway. Jake nodded approvingly. About time. As we packed our bags and prepared to check out, my phone chimed with a new email notification. It was from Marcus, addressed to the entire Horizon team. Incredible news, it read. Following our Anderson. Win. We've received distribution offers from 3 major platforms. Conference call tomorrow to discuss. This is just the beginning, everyone. I showed the email to Jake, who whooped and punched the air dramatically. See? This is what happens when you ignore the haters and do your thing. His simplistic summary made me smile, though the reality had been far more complex and painful than just ignoring haters. Still, there was truth in his assessment. Success had come not from convincing skeptics or changing minds, but from pursuing excellence despite the absence of support. As we left the hotel and merged into the bustling Manhattan morning, I felt a curious sense of freedom. The weight of familial disapproval that had shadowed me for years seemed lighter somehow. Not gone entirely, but reduced to manageable proportions. Whatever came next, whether further success or new challenges, I would face it on my own terms, measured by my own standards rather than the shifting expectations of others. Returning to San Francisco after the Whirlwind Festival experience felt like stepping back into an alternate reality. The cramped studio apartment, the familiar walk to Horizon's offices, the corner cafe where I grabbed my morning coffee, all seemed unchanged, yet I viewed them through a different lens. The Monday morning after our return, Marcus called an all-hands meeting to discuss the distribution offers. The entire staff crowded into the conference room, the excitement palpable as he outlined 3 potential deals from major streaming platforms. Each offer has its merits, Marcus explained, clicking through a presentation of contract details. Platform A offers the largest upfront payment but limited marketing commitment. Platform B provides a smaller advance but guarantees prominent placement in their animation category for 6 months. Platform C falls somewhere in between financially, but includes consideration for funding our next project. The discussion was lively, with team members passionately advocating for different options. I found myself supporting Platform B. The visibility would mean more to our careers long-term than a slightly larger initial payout. After nearly 2 hours of debate, Marcus called for a straw poll. Platform B emerged as the clear favorite, and he nodded in agreement. "I'll have our lawyers begin negotiations," he announced. "Meanwhile, we have something equally important to discuss: bonuses." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Horizon was known for fair compensation, but not for extravagance. "The Anderson win has significantly increased our company's value and profile," Marcus continued. "The board and I feel strongly that those who contributed directly to the film should share in its success." He distributed envelopes to the core team members, including me. Inside mine was a check for $15,000, a substantial sum that immediately eased the financial strain of recent months. "This isn't just a bonus," Marcus added as we stared at our checks in disbelief. "It's a statement of our commitment to valuing creative talent appropriately. Too many studios treat animators as interchangeable assets. At Horizon, we recognize that our people are our greatest strength." That evening, I made two immediate decisions with my unexpected windfall. First, I transferred $5,000 to my parents with a simple note: "For Dad's medical bills and whatever else you need. No arguments. I'm doing well." The second decision was more complicated. After much internal debate, I purchased a plane ticket to Michigan for the following weekend. It was time to face my family's situation directly, rather than letting it simmer from a distance. My mother was overjoyed when I called to tell her I was coming home for a visit. "We'll have a proper celebration," she insisted, despite my protests. That no fuss was necessary. The flight to Detroit gave me time to reflect on how I wanted to handle potential interactions with extended family, particularly Uncle Richard. I had received several more messages from relatives in the days following the award ceremony, some genuinely congratulatory, others transparently attempting to re-establish connections now that my career showed promise. I had responded politely, but briefly to most, unwilling to pretend the previous months of silence hadn't happened. My father picked me up at the airport, moving more stiff than usual, but beaming with pride. The drive to Riverdale was filled with comfortable conversation about his recovery, local news, and updates on neighbors. It wasn't until we turned onto our street that he addressed the elephant in the room. "Your Uncle Richard called yesterday," he said, his expression carefully neutral. "Wanted to know if you were coming to town anytime soon. Said he'd like to take you to dinner at the country club." I tensed involuntarily. "And what did you tell him?" "That you had your own schedule and priorities." My father glanced at me. "I didn't tell him when you were arriving. Figured that was your call to make." The consideration in this simple act, protecting my space and agency, reminded me why my parents' support had always meant more than any validation from Uncle Richard or others in the family. "Thanks, Dad," I said quietly. "I haven't decided if I want to see him yet." He nodded, understanding without requiring further explanation. "Whatever you decide, your mother and I are behind you. Though I should warn you, she's invited some people over tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just a small gathering to celebrate your award." "Define small," I said suspiciously. His guilty smile told me everything I needed to know. The small gathering turned out to include nearly 30 people, neighbors, parents, friends, and a handful of relatives who lived locally. My mother had transformed the modest backyard with string lights, printed screenshots from the award livestream, and a banner reading, "Congratulations, Nathan," in hand-painted letters. I was touched by the effort, even as I felt a twinge of discomfort at being the center of attention. Throughout the evening, I fielded the same questions repeatedly. What was the festival like? Had I met any celebrities? Would the film be available to watch locally? Most guests were genuinely interested and supportive, especially those who had known me since childhood. Mrs. Calloway, my high school art teacher, made a special appearance, bringing a framed sketch I had drawn in her class a decade earlier. "I always knew," she said, gripping my hands in hers. "Even then, There was something special in how you saw the world and translated it onto paper. 3 of my cousins attended, including Jake, who had flown back to Michigan the day after I returned to California. He had apparently become my unofficial publicist, regaling anyone who would listen with embellished stories of our New York adventures. Thachigi, after party was insane, he told a rapt audience of neighbors. Nathan was talking to this famous director like they were old friends. Then this producer from one of the big studios comes over and practically begs him to consider working for them. I caught his eye and raised an eyebrow at the exaggeration. He grinned unrepentantly and continued his tale. As the evening progressed, I found myself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasure of being celebrated by people who had known me before. I had any professional credentials, people who valued me regardless of industry accolades. Around 9 o'clock, the garden gate opened, and Uncle Richard stepped in, accompanied by his wife and daughter Melissa. The conversation around me faltered as heads turned toward the new arrivals. My father immediately moved to intercept them, his body language defensive. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Dad," I said quietly. "I'll handle it." Walking across the yard toward my uncle, I was struck by how different he appeared from my childhood memories. He seemed smaller somehow, less imposing. Perhaps success had changed my perception of what power looked like. "Nathan," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Quite a celebration you've got here." I shook his hand briefly. "I wasn't expecting to." "See you, Uncle Richard? Your mother mentioned the gathering when she ran into Sandra at the grocery store." He gestured to his wife. "Hope you don't mind us dropping by. We wanted to congratulate you in person." His tone was pleasant, his smile practiced. Nothing in his demeanor acknowledged the months of disparagement or the family rift he had engineered. "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "It's been an exciting time." An awkward silence fell between us. My cousin Melissa broke it with forced brightness. "So, Nathan, are you moving to Los Angeles now? That's where all the big animation studios are, right?" Before I could answer, Uncle Richard interjected. "Actually, Nathan and I were discussing some potential crossover opportunities between architecture and animation. Weren't we, Nathan? Visual storytelling applies to both fields." The blatant fabrication, we had discussed nothing of the sort, was so audacious I almost laughed. Instead, I studied him with new clarity. This was how he operated, rewriting reality to maintain his position as the family authority, the connection maker, the successful one dispensing wisdom and opportunity to the less fortunate. "I don't recall that conversation," I said evenly. "But Horizon is keeping me pretty busy in San Francisco. We're in negotiations with major platforms for distribution, and there's already talk about our next project." Uncle Richard's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, my offer stands. The architecture world is always looking for fresh visual approaches. My firm in particular has been exploring more innovative presentation methods." I recognize the tactic, positioning himself as the one offering opportunity rather than acknowledging my success on its own terms. "I appreciate that," I said, though we both knew I didn't. "If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Calloway was just telling me about a student exhibition she's organizing." As I turned away, I caught Melissa's expression, a mixture of embarrassment and something that might have been respect. She and I had never been close, but at that moment, I wondered if she too had experienced the suffocating weight of Uncle Richard's expectations and revisionist tendencies. Later that night, after most guests had departed, I sat with my parents on the back porch. The string light still twinkled above us, creating pockets of warm glow in the darkness. "You handled Richard well," my father commented, nursing a last glass of celebration punch. "Better than I would have." "I've had time to process," I admitted, "and perspective helps. Seeing him tonight, I realized something. He's not the titan I imagined as a kid. He's just a man who needs to believe he's at the center of everyone's universe." My mother reached over to squeeze my hand. "You've grown up, Nathan. Not just professionally." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the familiar suburban night sounds, distant traffic, a neighbor's dog barking, the soft chirp of crickets. It struck me how foreign these sounds had become after years in San Francisco's urban landscape. "Have you thought about what's next?" my father eventually asked. "With the film's success, I imagine you have options." It was a question I'd been pondering since the festival. Marcus is pushing for me to lead character design on Horizon's next project. The distribution deal includes funding for a new film, and he's already outlining concepts. "That sounds like a great opportunity," my mother encouraged. "It is," I agreed. But part of me is considering freelancing. The Anderson Award has led to several inquiries from studios and indie directors. There's a freedom in being able to choose projects based on creative merit rather than company needs. My father nodded thoughtfully. "You know what's best for your career. We just want you to be happy and secure." "I know, Dad." The simple acceptance in his words, so different from the questioning and undermining I'd grown accustomed to from other family members, reminded me why my parents' opinion had always mattered most. The next morning, I woke early to the smell of coffee and my mother's signature blueberry pancakes. As we ate breakfast, my phone rang with an unfamiliar New York number. "Nathan Reed? This is Elaine Winters from Animation Monthly." Animation Monthly was the industry's leading publication, read by professionals and studios worldwide. I nearly choked on my pancake. "Yes, this is Nathan," I managed, mouthing work call to my curious parents. "I'm putting together a feature on emerging animators reshaping the industry," she explained. "Your work on the Lighthouse Keepers song caught our attention, particularly after the Anderson win. Would you be interested in being profiled?" The opportunity was significant. Animation Monthly profiles often launched careers to new heights, bringing artists to the attention of major studios and directors. "I'd be honored," I replied, trying to sound more composed than I felt. "Excellent. We'd need to schedule a video interview and get some samples of your work process. Sketches, progression reels, that sort of thing. Our deadline is tight. We're going to press in 3 weeks. Would that work for you?" After confirming details and ending the call, I shared the news with my parents, who responded with the perfect blend of excitement and immediate practical questions about what I needed to prepare. "You should include some of your high school work," my mother suggested. "Show how your style has evolved." "And that experimental short you did in college," my father added. "The one with the paper airplane." Their intimate knowledge of my creative journey, remembering projects I had almost forgotten, was deeply moving. These were the people who had saved every drawing, attended every student showcase, and believed in my ability long before external validation confirmed it. The remaining days of my visit passed quickly. I spent time helping my father with projects around the house, careful to respect his physical limitations while allowing him the dignity of contributing. My mother and I went through old sketchbooks, selecting pieces that might complement the Animation Monthly profile. I also reconnected with a few cousins who reached out after the party, meeting them for coffee or brief visits. These conversations were sometimes stilted, the unspoken tension of past estrangement hovering beneath surface pleasantries, but I found myself willing to build new bridges, not out of vindication, but from a place of genuine desire for family, connection. Uncle Richard called twice more, leaving voicemails about getting together before I returned to California. I didn't return the calls. Perhaps someday we would have a real conversation about the damage done. But I wasn't ready yet, and I suspected he wasn't capable of the honesty such a discussion would require. The night before my departure, as I packed my carry-on bag, my father knocked on the door of my childhood bedroom. "Got a minute?" he asked, holding a small wooden box I recognized from his workshop. "Sure," I said, setting aside my packing. He sat on the edge of the bed, turning the box in his weathered hands. "I've been working on this since we found out about your award. Finally finished it last night." He passed me the box. The woodwork was exquisite. cherry wood polished to a soft glow, with intricate inlay around the edges. My initials were carved into the lid with remarkable precision. "Dad, this is beautiful," I said, running my fingers over the smooth surface. "Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled in dark blue velvet, was a miniature lighthouse carved from pale wood, every detail meticulously rendered. The spiral staircase visible through tiny windows, the beacon at the top, even the weathered texture of stone. "I thought you might want somewhere special to keep your award when it arrives," he explained. "The lighthouse seemed fitting, given your film." The thoughtfulness of the gift, hours of careful work despite his back pain, the perfect symbolic connection to my professional achievement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thanks, Dad," I said, carefully lifting the carving to examine it closer. "This means more than any industry award." He clasped my shoulder briefly, uncomfortable, with too much emotion. "You've made your own way, Nathan. Find your own path. That's all any parent can hope for." After he left, I placed the wooden lighthouse on my nightstand, where moonlight from the window caught its edges and cast long shadows across the familiar room. The contrast struck me. This symbol of my current life illuminated in the space of my childhood. These two worlds finally existing in harmony rather than opposition. Morning came too quickly. At the airport, my mother hugged me fiercely, making me promise to call more often. My father's embrace was gentler but no less heartfelt. "We're coming to California next time," my mother insisted. "No excuses. We want to see this fancy animation studio of yours." "It's a date," I agreed, realizing how much I wanted them to see the world I had built for myself. As I boarded the plane back to San Francisco, I felt a new equilibrium settling within me. The family wounds weren't completely healed. Some relationships might never fully recover, but the acute pain had subsided into something manageable, a dull ache rather than a sharp stab. The validation I had once desperately sought from Uncle Richard and others now seemed irrelevant compared to the quiet certainty of my parents' unwavering support and the professional respect I had earned through dedicated work. My phone chimed as the plane prepared for takeoff, a text from Marcus, with a link to an industry news site. The headline read, "Lighthouse Keeper's Song Distribution Deal Finalized, Horizon Animation Makes History with Record-Breaking Agreement." Below, it was a subheading. Lead animator Nathan Reed tapped to head character design team for studio's ambitious next project. I smiled, switching my phone to airplane mode as the flight attendant passed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, creative roadblocks, professional competition, lingering family tension, I would face them with the confidence of someone who had already weathered significant storms and emerged stronger. The plane accelerated down the runway, lifting into clear Michigan skies. As the familiar landscape of my hometown shrank beneath me, I thought about the duality of leaving and returning, how each departure changed the meaning of home, how each homecoming revealed new aspects of who I had become. In my carry-on, carefully wrapped in clothing, the wooden lighthouse my father had crafted represented this evolution perfectly. A beacon built by family hands, guiding my way forward, while honoring where I had begun. Returning to San Francisco felt different this time. The city that had once seemed like a temporary stopping point on my career journey now felt more like home. I viewed the familiar landmarks through fresh eyes. The Golden Gate Bridge emerging from morning fog, the colorful Victorian houses lining steep streets, the bustle of downtown where creatives and tech workers merged in a unique cultural ecosystem. My apartment, which had always felt like a glorified storage space for my exhausted body between work shifts, now demanded attention. I spent the weekend after my return painting walls, hanging artwork, and investing in proper furniture. If this was to be my home, it should reflect who I was becoming, not just the struggling animator who had initially rented it. Monday morning brought a renewed sense of purpose as I walked into Horizon's offices. The atmosphere had subtly shifted. During the week, I'd been away. There was an energy, a confidence that hadn't been there before. The Anderson win and distribution deal had transformed how the team saw themselves and their work. Marcus waved me into his office before I could even reach my desk. "Welcome back," he said, gesturing for me to close the door. "How was the hometown hero's return?" I smiled at the characterization. "Educational. Family dynamics are complicated." "Aren't they always?" He shuffled through papers on his desk. "Speaking of complicated things, we need to talk about your role going forward." A flicker of anxiety passed through me. Despite our recent success, the animation industry was notoriously volatile. Layoffs often followed major project completions, even at successful studios. Marcus must have read my expression. "Relax. This is good news. The board has approved a significant expansion following the distribution deal. We're doubling our animation team and creating dedicated departments for character design, environmental work, and technical innovation." He slid a document across the desk. "We want you to head the character design department. 6 animators reporting to you, creative control over character development for all upcoming projects, and obviously, a substantial salary bump." I stared at the offer letter, processing the implications. It wasn't just a promotion, but a complete career transformation, from individual contributor to creative leader, from animator to decision maker. "This is unexpected," I managed, scanning the compensation package that far exceeded anything I had imagined possible at this stage of my career. "Is it?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You've consistently delivered exceptional work, even under impossible deadlines. Your character designs for The Lighthouse Keeper became the film's emotional anchor. The Anderson judges specifically mentioned the animation quality in their decision." He leaned forward. "More importantly, you've shown something rare in this industry, the ability to translate personal insight into universal emotion. That's not a technical skill we can teach. It's an artistic intuition that elevates everything you touch." The validation from someone whose opinion I truly respected meant more than any award or public recognition. Still, the scope of the opportunity was intimidating. "I've never managed a team before," I pointed out. "There are more experienced animators here who might resent taking direction from me." Marcus waved away the concern. "Leadership isn't about experience. It's about vision and the ability to inspire others to execute that vision. You've shown both. As for resentment," he shrugged, "success always breeds some jealousy. Learning to handle that is part of the job." The conversation shifted to practical matters: timeline for department formation, project priorities, recruiting needs. By the time I left his office an hour later, my head was spinning with possibilities and responsibilities I hadn't imagined taking on for years, if ever. Over the following weeks, my life transformed at a dizzying pace. The Animation Monthly interview expanded into a 6-page spread featuring my work process, artistic influences, and career journey. The writer seemed particularly interested in the contrast between my small-town upbringing and current industry position, framing it as a classic underdog narrative. "Your uncle tried to discourage you from pursuing animation?" she asked during our video interview, having picked up on a passing reference I'd made. I hesitated, uncomfortable with publicly airing family tensions. He had different ideas about what constitutes a viable career path. Many people from traditional professional backgrounds do. But he was wrong, she pressed, seeking the conflict that would make her story more compelling. He was operating from a different perspective and different values, I replied diplomatically. Success looks different to different people. The finished article was more nuanced than I had feared, focusing primarily on my creative process rather than family drama. The publication coincided with the official streaming release of the Lighthouse Keeper song, creating a perfect storm of attention that soon extended beyond industry circles. Local news outlets in Michigan picked up the story, framing it as local animator makes it big. My mother called, laughing, to tell me that the Riverdale Chronicle had run a front-page feature titled, "Native Son Brings Hollywood Acclaim to Small-Town Roots." "You should see the diner," she reported. "They've put up a signed photo of you, next to the high school football championship team picture. Your father pretends to be embarrassed, but he points it out to everyone who comes in." These hometown celebrations, though touching, were far less significant than the industry response. My inbox is filled with congratulatory messages from former classmates now working at major studios. Several included casual mentions of upcoming projects and suggestions to grab coffee sometime, the animation world's thinly veiled way of exploring potential collaboration. Most surprising was an email from Professor Martinez, my former instructor, who had first connected me with Horizon. "I always knew you had exceptional talent," she wrote, "but watching you develop into a creative force has been one of my greatest professional joys. I'd like to discuss the possibility of you guest lecturing for our advanced character design course next semester. Students need to hear from someone who has successfully navigated the early career gauntlet." The thought of returning to my alma mater as an instructor, rather than a struggling student, was surreal. I accepted immediately, already mentally outlining what insights might actually benefit students facing the daunting prospect of breaking into the industry. Meanwhile, my new role at Horizon brought both exhilarating opportunities and unexpected challenges. Building a department from scratch meant establishing workflows, communication protocols, and creative standards that would shape our output for years to come. The team members assigned to me ranged from a recent graduate with raw talent but limited technical skills to a veteran animator 20 years my senior who had narrowly missed the promotion I'd received. Managing their varying expectations, insecurities, and working styles required interpersonal finesse I hadn't needed as an individual contributor. "You need to be more direct with Tyler," Marcus advised, after sitting in on a feedback session where I had cushioned criticism of a junior animator's work with excessive praise. "Kindness is important, but clarity is essential. He can't improve if he doesn't understand what's lacking." Conversely, when I took a more straightforward approach with Dana, the veteran animator, she bristled at suggestions from someone she viewed as less experienced. "I've been animating since you were in grade school," she remarked after I questioned her character proportions for a project concept. This approach has worked on 4 feature films. Learning to calibrate my communication style for each team member while maintaining consistent creative standards became a daily balancing act. Some days I succeeded brilliantly, others ended with me questioning whether I belonged in a leadership position at all. 3 months into my new role, as we were deep in development for Horizon's next major project, an ambitious animated adaptation of a beloved children's book series, I received an unexpected email from my cousin Melissa. "I'm going to be in San Francisco next week for an architectural conference," she wrote. "Would you be up for getting dinner? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." My relationship with Melissa had always been cordial, but distant. As Uncle Richard's daughter, she had followed his prescribed path into architecture, achieving the kind of conventional success he valued. Our interactions at family gatherings had typically been superficial, neither antagonistic nor particularly warm. Curious about her sudden interest in connecting, I agreed to meet at a restaurant near my apartment. When she arrived, I was struck by how much she resembled her father. The same confident posture, calculated smile, and carefully curated business casual attire that conveyed success without ostentation. After obligatory small talk about her conference and my work, she got to the point with a directness I hadn't expected. "I wanted to apologize," she said, setting down her wine glass with precision, "for not speaking up when my father was undermining you to the family, for going along with it, for maybe even enjoying the contrast between our career paths, at least, initially." The confession caught me off guard. Melissa had always seemed comfortable with her position as the family success story, the one who had made the right choices according to Uncle Richard's value system. "What changed?" I asked. She sighed, absent-mindedly rearranging her silverware. "Two things, really. Seeing you handle my father at that backyard party with such dignity, I guess. No defensiveness, no need to prove anything. It made me realize how much energy I've spent trying to justify my own choices to him, even when they align with what he wants." She paused, taking a sip of wine before continuing. "And then last month, I presented a design concept for a major client, something genuinely innovative that pushed beyond our firm's usual conservative approach. My father shut it down immediately, calling it impractical experimentation. The client loved it when they saw preliminary sketches, but he wouldn't even consider presenting the full concept." The frustration in her voice was palpable, the sound of someone bumping against limitations she had previously accepted without question. "That must have been difficult," I offered, genuinely sympathetic despite our complicated history. "It made me wonder how many times he's stifled creativity, mine and others, in the name of practicality or tradition." She met my eyes directly. "And it made me think about how much courage it must have taken for you to pursue your vision, despite his constant dismissal." We talked for nearly 3 hours, our conversation evolving from career challenges to deeper reflections on family dynamics, creative expression, and the courage required to define success on one's own terms. By the time we said goodbye, something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. Mutual respect had replaced the polite distance that had previously characterized our interactions. "If you're ever in Chicago, let me know," she said as we parted. "I'd like to show you some of my experimental designs, the ones that never make it past my sketchbook." "I'd like that," I replied, meaning it. "And if you ever want to explore the creative side of architectural visualization, Horizon's new environmental design team is doing some groundbreaking work in that space." Back at my apartment, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in a year. The desperate need for validation that had driven me, from family, from the industry, from anyone who might confirm I hadn't made a catastrophic mistake with. My life choices had gradually transformed into something steadier and more sustainable. Success hadn't eliminated insecurity, but it had provided enough external confirmation to quiet the loudest internal doubts. The following weekend, I FaceTimed with my parents as had become our Sunday ritual. They were eager to hear about Horizon's upcoming projects and the guest lecture I was preparing for my alma mater. "We've been thinking about visiting in August," my mother mentioned, her excitement evident even through the small screen. "Your father's back is much better, and we found reasonably priced flights." "That would be great," I said, already planning which restaurants to take them to, which city landmarks they would enjoy most. "The studio has a friends and family day coming up. You could see where I work, meet the team." "We'd love that," my father said. "And speaking of family, have you heard from Richard lately?" I shook my head. "Not since I left Michigan, though I did have dinner with Melissa while she was here for a conference." My parents exchanged a look that suggested there was something they weren't telling me. "What is it?" I asked, immediately, alert to their hesitation. My mother sighed. "We didn't want to bother you with this, but Richard's firm is having difficulties. There was an article in the local business journal about them losing several major clients." "Is it serious?" Despite everything, I couldn't help feeling a twinge of concern. "Serious enough that he's scaled back a lot of the extravagances," my father replied with characteristic understatement. "No more country club membership, sold the my vacation home on Lake Michigan." I processed this information, surprised by my lack of schadenfreude. The vindication I might have expected to feel at Uncle Richard's reversal of fortune was absent, replaced by a more complex emotion. Not quite sympathy, but a recognition of how precarious anyone's position could be, how quickly the metrics by which we measure success could change. "If there's anything I can do to help," I offered, though I wasn't sure what that might entail. My mother smiled gently. "Just keep doing what you're doing, honey. Your success isn't diminished by anyone else's struggles." After the call, I pulled up the article about Uncle Richard's firm on my laptop. The business reporter had taken a measured tone, noting the company's previous prominence and suggesting the current difficulties were part of a larger industry shift rather than due to mismanagement. Reading between the lines, I recognized the face-saving narrative Uncle Richard would have carefully cultivated. Economic forces beyond control rather than strategic missteps, temporary setbacks rather than fundamental weakness. I understood the impulse all too well, having crafted similar stories for myself during the leanest times of my early career. The realization sparked an unexpected moment of connection with my uncle, not forgiveness exactly, but recognition of a shared human vulnerability beneath his carefully constructed facade of infallibility. On impulse, I wrote him a brief email. "Heard about the challenges your firm is facing. The architecture industry is experiencing significant disruption, much like animation did a decade ago when digital tools transformed the landscape. If you're interested in how creative industries navigate technological and economic shifts, I'd be happy to share what I've learned from Horizon's experience. Hope you and the family are well." It wasn't an olive branch exactly, nor was it a gloating reminder of how our positions had reversed. It was something more nuanced, an acknowledgement that success in any field is never permanent, that adaptation requires humility, and that there might be value in perspectives from unexpected sources. Didn't expect a response and was surprised when one arrived the following morning. "Nathan, appreciate the note. The industry is indeed changing rapidly. Would be interested in your insights when time permits. Currently focused on restructuring and reorienting our approach. Congratulations again on your continued success. Richard." Brief and formal, but without the condescension that had characterized our previous interactions. Whether this represented genuine growth or simply the humbling effect of professional setbacks remained to be seen, but it felt like a small step toward a more authentic relationship. As I prepared for my morning commute to the studio, I glanced at the wooden lighthouse my father had carved, now displayed prominently on my living room bookshelf. It reminded me of the film that had changed my trajectory, the family bonds that had endured despite strain, and the creative spark that had guided me through the darkest periods of doubt. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Big news. Meeting at 9 a.m. Platform is interested in a 3-project deal based on Lighthouse success." I smiled at the timing. Another lighthouse guiding the way forward. Grabbing my bag, I headed out. The door, mentally outlining character concepts for stories not yet written, worlds not yet built, creative challenges not yet overcome. The path ahead would undoubtedly include failures alongside successes, doubts alongside certainties, but I would face them from a foundation of hard-won confidence in my abilities and clearer perspective on what truly constituted success. Not external validation or comparative advantage, but the satisfaction of creating work with integrity and purpose. As the morning fog began to lift from the San Francisco streets, revealing the day's possibilities, I felt a profound gratitude for the journey, not despite its difficulties, but because of them. Every dismissal, every doubt, every financial struggle had contributed to the person I had become and the work I was now empowered to create. The fraud Uncle Richard had described to our family had never existed. Neither had the overnight success some now perceived. The truth lay somewhere in between, in the daily choice to persist, to improve, to believe in the value of creative vision even when no one else did. That, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all. The 3-project deal with the streaming platform transformed Horizon from a promising mid-sized studio into a significant player in the animation industry. Within months, our staff doubled. We moved to a larger office space in downtown San Francisco, and the industry press began mentioning us alongside established studios when discussing the future of animation. My role evolved accordingly. Leading. The character design department for one project expanded to overseeing creative consistency across all 3 films in development. My team grew from 6 to 15 animators, including specialists recruited from major studios who had been attracted by Horizon's rising profile and innovative approach. "We need to talk about your title," Marcus said during one of our weekly check-ins, about 8 months after the streaming deal was announced. "Creative Director of Character Animation doesn't fully capture your current responsibilities." "I'm not particularly concerned about titles," I replied, reviewing production schedules on my tablet. Deadlines for our first project under the new deal were looming, and we were cutting it close on several critical sequences. "Well, the board is," Marcus persisted. "They're proposing Associate Creative Director for the studio as a whole. You'd report directly to me, but have authority across all creative departments." I looked up, finally registering the significance of what he was suggesting. "That's a major promotion." "It's recognition of your contribution to where we are now," he countered. "The Lighthouse characters became our studio's signature. The look, the emotional resonance, that's become our brand identity. The board wants to ensure that DNA extends through all our projects." The promotion came with another substantial salary increase, an equity stake in the company, and significantly more pressure. My workdays, already long, extended further as I found myself involved in every aspect of production, from initial concept art to final rendering decisions. Creative differences between department heads now landed on my desk for resolution, forcing me to balance artistic integrity against production realities in ways I hadn't anticipated. "You can't be everyone's friend anymore," Marcus advised after I struggled with implementing necessary changes to an environmental design that failed to integrate properly with character movements. "Sometimes leadership means making unpopular decisions for the good of the project." Learning this balance, when to stand firm, when to compromise, when to delegate, when to intervene directly, became my greatest professional challenge. There were missteps and moments of self-doubt, weeks when I questioned whether I had risen beyond my capabilities. But gradually, I developed an instinct for navigating the complex intersection of creativity, technology, and human dynamics that defined studio leadership. Outside work, my life was evolving as well. The improved financial situation allowed me to purchase a modest condo in a neighborhood I had previously only dreamed of affording. The security of homeownership altered my perspective, creating a sense of permanence and possibility that rental living had never provided. I began dating Grace, a children's book illustrator I met at an industry panel discussion. Our shared creative language and complementary perspectives, her work was whimsical and lighthearted, mine often more emotionally complex, created a relationship unlike any I'd experienced before. For the first time, I had a partner who truly understood the demands and rewards of creative work, who didn't view late nights finalizing a design as neglect, but as necessary passion. "Your characters always look like they're carrying the weight of the world," she observed one evening, reviewing my sketches for a new project. "Even the happy ones have this depth in their eyes, like they know joy is temporary." "Is that bad?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious about my creative instincts. "Not at all," she smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's what makes them feel real. My characters probably need more of that complexity." Her insight reminded me of how Professor Martinez had once described my work: technically proficient, but emotionally guarded. The evolution from that assessment to Grace's observation marked not just my artistic growth, but my personal development as well. Opening myself to vulnerability in life had somehow translated to greater emotional authenticity in my creative output. My parents visited San Francisco that August as planned, showing them around the new Horizon studios, the expansive workspace with state-of-the-art equipment, the wall displaying our Anderson Award alongside newly acquired industry recognitions, the dedicated screening room where our works in progress came to life, filled me with a pride I hadn't anticipated. I had no idea it was so professional, my father commented, taking in the bustle of activity around us. The slight awe in his voice reminded me that despite their unwavering support, my parents had never fully understood what my daily work entailed. Animation has come a long way from Saturday morning cartoons, I explained, introducing them to team members and explaining the various specialized roles that contributed to our projects. My mother stopped in front of the character design wall, where concept art for our current production was displayed. "These are all yours?" she asked, studying the array of expressions captured in quick sketches and refined digital renderings. "Some are mine," I clarified. "Others are from my team, based on my initial designs and direction." She studied a particular series showing a young protagonist's face transitioning through subtle emotional states. Uncertainty to determination, fear to resolve. "I see you in them," she said quietly. "Not your face exactly, but something in the eyes. The way you used to look when you were working through a difficult problem as a child." Her observation startled me. I had never consciously inserted myself into my character designs, yet her comment resonated with truth. The emotional authenticity that critics had praised in my work came from drawing on my own experiences, translating personal struggles and triumphs into universal expressions that audiences could connect with. The studio visit concluded with a special screening of completed sequences from our upcoming release, arranged specifically for my parents' visit. Watching their reactions, my father's pleased nod at technically impressive moments, my mother's emotional engagement with the story beats, brought my professional and personal worlds together in a way I had long desired but never quite achieved. That evening, over dinner at a restaurant overlooking the bay, my father raised the subject of Uncle Richard. "He's asked about you several times," he mentioned, carefully neutral in his tone. "Wanted to know how you were doing, if we'd seen your new place." I set down my fork, considering this information. "And what did you tell him?" "The truth," my father replied simply. "That you're doing exceptionally well, that your work is valued and your future secure." "There was no smugness in your father's reports," my mother added with a slight smile. "Though I might have indulged a bit when speaking with your Aunt Sandra." The thought of my mother, always the diplomatic one in family matters, engaging in even mild gloating, amused me. "Has Uncle Richard's business situation improved?" My parents exchanged glances. "He's adjusted," my father said. "Downsized the firm, refocused on smaller projects, and brought in younger partners with fresh perspectives. He's not the power player he once was, but they're stable." "Good," I said, and meant it. Whatever resentment I had harbored toward Uncle Richard had faded with time and my own security. Success had provided the best possible resolution, not the opportunity to gloat, but the freedom to move beyond the need for either vengeance or validation. "He mentioned he might be coming to San Francisco for a conference in October," my mother ventured carefully. "I think he'd like to see you, if you're open to it." I considered the possibility, surprised to find I wasn't immediately resistant. "Maybe. We'll see how things look closer to the time. Work is going to be intense through September with our release deadline." The conversation moved to other topics. Updates on neighbors back home, my father's woodworking projects, my mother's community garden initiative. But the mention of Uncle Richard lingered in my thoughts, prompting reflection on how thoroughly our dynamic had been transformed by changed circumstances. After my parents returned to Michigan, life accelerated to a dizzying pace as we approached the release date for our first film under the streaming deal. The pressure was immense. This project would establish whether The Lighthouse Keeper's song had been a fortuitous success or indicative of Horizon's true capabilities. Industry observers and competitors were watching closely, ready to either validate or dismiss our studio's rising status. Late nights became the norm again, reminiscent of my early days at Horizon, but with substantially higher stakes. Grace was understanding but concerned, often bringing dinner to the studio when I couldn't break away, gently insisting I take brief walks around the block to clear my head when creative solutions seemed elusive. "You can't pour from an empty cup," she reminded me during a particularly grueling week. "The best creative solutions come when you allow your mind to rest." She was right, of course. Some of our most significant breakthroughs came not during frantic work sessions, but in moments of apparent idleness: a morning shower, a weekend hike, the twilight state between waking and sleeping. The creative mind required fallow periods to regenerate, a lesson I was continuously learning and relearning. 2 weeks before our release date, I received an unexpected email from Uncle Richard confirming he would indeed be in San Francisco for an architectural sustainability conference. "I understand you're likely quite busy with your current project," he wrote, his tone more collegial than I had ever experienced from him. "But if your schedule permits, I would appreciate the opportunity to meet. There are matters I'd like to discuss in person." The careful wording revealed a shift in our power dynamic so profound it was almost uncomfortable. Gone was the casual assumption of authority, the implicit positioning as mentor to my novice. In its place was something approaching peer-to-peer communication, perhaps even containing a hint of deference. After consulting with Grace, who encouraged the meeting while warning me to maintain emotional boundaries, I agreed to have dinner with Uncle Richard during his conference visit. We arranged to meet at a mid-range restaurant near his hotel, neither the extravagant venue he might have selected in his heyday, nor a deliberately modest choice that would emphasize his reduced circumstances. Seeing him in person accentuated the changes hinted at in our electronic communications. He had aged visibly since our last encounter at my parents' backyard celebration. His hair had thinned, lines deepened around his eyes and mouth, and his posture, while still projecting confidence, lacked the domineering quality I remembered from childhood. "Nathan?" he greeted me with an extended hand. "Thank you for making time. I know this is a critical period for your studio." "It's good to see you, Uncle Richard," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "How's the conference?" We exchanged pleasantries about his professional event and my upcoming release, establishing a neutral conversational foundation before addressing weightier matters. He asked thoughtful questions about animation production timelines and distribution strategies, seemingly genuine in his interest rather than searching for weaknesses to critique. Eventually, after our main courses arrived, he set down his fork and addressed the elephant in the room. "I owe you an apology," he said, his direct gaze showing this wasn't a casual remark. "My attitude toward your career choice was dismissive and, frankly, narrow-minded. I discouraged you from a path that clearly aligned with your talents and brought you well-deserved success." The acknowledgement was more than I had expected, though it noticeably lacked specific reference to his active campaign to diminish me within the family. "I was operating from an outdated perspective," he continued when I didn't immediately respond. "Architecture seemed secure, animation risky. I wanted to protect you from what I perceived as an uncertain future." It was a generous framing of his motivations, placing them in the context of misguided concern rather than the status consciousness and rigid thinking I had always perceived. Still, it represented a movement toward accountability that I wouldn't have thought possible from the Uncle Richard of 3 years ago. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "Though your concerns affected more than just me, they influenced how the entire family viewed my choices and my character." He nodded, accepting this extension of responsibility. "That wasn't my intention, but it was certainly the effect. I've spoken with your parents about this, and with Melissa, who was quite direct about my impact on family dynamics." The thought of Melissa confronting her father on my behalf was both surprising and touching. Our dinner conversation in San Francisco had apparently catalyzed more than just a reconnection between cousins. "Melissa mentioned you two had dinner," he added, confirming my suspicion. "She speaks highly of your insights regarding creative risk-taking. In fact, she's implementing some of your suggestions in her current project." This revelation shifted the conversation into unexpected territory. professional respect across our divergent fields. For the next hour, we discussed the parallels between architecture and animation, the balance of technical constraints and creative vision, the challenges of leading creative teams through uncertain industry transformations. By the time we reached coffee, I realized we were having perhaps the first authentic conversation of our adult relationship, one based on mutual professional respect rather than familial power dynamics. "My firm is establishing a digital visualization department," he mentioned as we prepared to leave, "using animation techniques to create immersive presentations of architectural concepts. If you know any talented animators with interest in that direction, I'd appreciate recommendations." The request for professional assistance, acknowledging my industry connections and expertise, completed the transformation of our relationship. Whatever personal history remained unresolved, we had established a new foundation based on recognition of each other's professional value. "I'll think about who might be a good fit," I promised. "And I'll have my technical director contact you about the software pipeline we've found most effective for environmental rendering. It might translate well to architectural applications." We parted with a handshake that felt more meaningful than any previous interaction. Not warm exactly, but respectful in a way that acknowledged both our complicated history and potential future connection. Walking back to my apartment afterward, I called my parents to share details of the meeting. They expressed cautious optimism about this evolution in family dynamics, though my mother couldn't resist noting that it had taken remarkable success on your part and humbling setbacks on his to bring about Uncle Richard's change in perspective. The following week brought the release of Horizon's new film, Echoes of Elsewhere, a story about parallel worlds and the connections between them. The streaming platform featured it prominently, supported by a marketing campaign that emphasized our Anderson Award pedigree while positioning this new work as an evolution of our distinctive style. Critical reception exceeded even our most optimistic projections. Reviews praised the film's emotional depth, visual innovation, and character authenticity. Several critics specifically highlighted the character design as setting new standards for expressiveness in animation. The central character's journey, from self-doubt to acceptance, is rendered with such nuance that viewers can read entire emotional narratives in the subtlest shift of expression, wrote the leading animation critic for a prominent entertainment publication. Reed's character design team has created animation that doesn't just move viewers, it speaks to them in a visual language as precise as any dialogue. Viewer response was equally enthusiastic, with social media buzz driving record streaming numbers for an animated feature on the platform. Within days, Horizon's visibility in the industry skyrocketed, leading to interview requests, speaking invitations, and, most significantly, an influx of portfolio submissions from top talent, eager to join our next project. The success brought personal validation that extended beyond professional recognition. Relatives who had once questioned my career choice now shared news articles about the film on social media, claiming early support of my unique vision. Family. Friends from Riverdale contacted my parents to report watching the film with their children, expressing amazement at seeing my name in the credits. Most meaningful was a video my mother sent, a recording from my former high school where Ms. Calloway had organized a special screening for her current art students, followed by a discussion about careers in animation. The students' questions revealed genuine curiosity about creative pathways beyond traditional options, suggesting that my journey might be expanding possibilities for the next generation of small-town dreamers. In the midst of post-release celebrations, Grace surprised me with a weekend getaway to a coastal town north of San Francisco, a chance to decompress after months of intense work and to reconnect with each other away from professional demands. Sitting on the deck of our rented cottage, overlooking the Pacific, watching the lighthouse beams sweep across darkening waters, I found myself reflecting on the circular nature of my journey. The lighthouse motif that had defined my breakthrough project now appeared as a real-world anchor, a silent witness to both professional achievement and personal growth. "What are you thinking about?" Grace asked, wrapping a blanket around our shoulders against the evening chill. Lighthouses, I replied. How they're designed to help navigate difficult passages. She followed my gaze to the distant beam. Are you still in a difficult passage? The question gave me pause. For so long, my narrative had been defined by struggle. The financial challenges of education, the professional uncertainty of early career, the painful family dynamics that had questioned my worth and choices. Success had resolved many of these external conflicts, yet part of me still operated as if constantly navigating treacherous waters. Maybe not, I admitted, both to her and myself. Maybe I've reached calmer seas than I've fully recognized. She leaned her head against my shoulder. That's not a bad thing, you know. Stability doesn't have to mean stagnation. It can be a platform for different kinds of growth, deeper work, more meaningful connections, exploration without desperation driving it. Her insight resonated deeply, illuminating the next challenge in my journey, learning to create from a place of security rather than struggle, to find artistic depth without the spur of external validation or financial necessity. As if reading, my thoughts, she added. The most interesting question isn't whether you'll continue to succeed. That seems fairly certain now. It's what you'll do with that success, what stories you'll choose to tell from this new vantage point. I gazed at the lighthouse beam sweeping steadily across the darkness, a beacon guiding travelers safely through uncertainty. The image that had launched my career now offered a metaphor for its continuation, not just illuminating dangers to avoid, but highlighting paths worth exploring, shores waiting to be discovered. I think I'd like to tell stories about transformation, I said finally. About people who evolve beyond the limitations others place on them, who find strength in adversity but don't remain defined by it. Stories where the journey matters more than the destination. Grace smiled, squeezing my hand. That sounds like a story worth telling, and worth living. As the night deepened around us, stars emerging above the lighthouse beam, I felt a profound sense of alignment between personal experience and creative vision, between past struggles and future possibilities, between the self others had once dismissed and the person I had become. Whatever stories lay ahead, whatever challenges emerged in this calmer passage, I would navigate them from a center of hard-won confidence and authentic purpose. The fraud my uncle had once described to my family had never existed. Neither had the overnight success some now perceived. What existed instead was something far more valuable, a creative life built on persistence, resilience, and the courage to remain true to one's vision, even when standing alone. That was the story I wanted to tell. That was the light I hoped to cast for others finding their way through darkness toward their own distant shores. The success of Echoes of Elsewhere catapulted Horizon to a new tier in the animation industry. Trade publications began mentioning us alongside established powerhouses, and competitors started monitoring our hiring activities and production announcements with noticeable interest. Our streaming partner fast-tracked the second film in our 3-picture deal, allocating additional resources to capitalize on the momentum. This accelerated timeline created both opportunities and challenges. The expanded budget allowed us to pursue more ambitious storytelling and technical innovations, but the compressed schedule meant difficult decisions about which creative elements deserved our limited time and attention. We can't give every sequence the same level of refinement, I explained during a particularly tense production meeting where department heads were advocating for their priorities. We need to identify the emotional tentpoles of the story and focus our deepest work there. This approach, strategic allocation of creative resources rather than uniform polish across all elements, became my signature as Associate Creative Director. It required clear vision about what mattered most in each project, the courage to make unpopular choices, and the communication skills to bring team members on board with these decisions. I won't tell you it doesn't hurt. It does. But I will say that building a chosen family of mentors and peers who understand your creative drive is essential. Find people who see your vision and support your growth, even when your biological family struggles to do so. I gestured toward Professor Martinez, who was hosting the lecture series. My professors here became that support system when family validation was scarce. Later, colleagues and mentors at Horizon provided similar affirmation. These relationships sustained me through periods when family support wavered. After the lecture, the student approached with tears in her eyes, sharing her own experience with parents who viewed her animation studies as a wasteful detour from a real career. Our conversation extended well beyond the scheduled time, ending with an offer to review her portfolio and an introduction to Professor Martinez's mentorship program. This interaction catalyzed something unexpected, a growing sense that my experiences might offer value beyond my creative contributions. The narrative of persistence despite doubt, of building success without universal support, resonated with emerging artists facing similar challenges. Gradually, mentorship became an increasingly significant aspect of my professional identity. I established a formal internship program at Horizon, specifically targeting talented students from non-traditional backgrounds in small towns, without established arts pipelines. We created virtual portfolio reviews for young artists unable to travel to industry hubs, and I began setting aside monthly hours for mentoring calls with promising students identified by trusted educators. Grace supported these initiatives enthusiastically, often joining me for student workshops and contributing her perspective as an illustrator with a different creative path. Our complementary experiences, my structured studio background, her freelance publishing career, offered students a broader view of creative possibilities. Our relationship deepened alongside these shared values. After 2 years together, we began discussing long-term plans, potentially buying a larger place together, combining our living and studio spaces, perhaps even collaborating on a children's book that would merge her illustration style with animated elements accessible through a companion app. I never expected to find someone who understands both the compulsion to create and the practical challenges of building a sustainable creative life, she confessed one evening as we sketched concepts for our potential collaboration. Most of my previous relationships crumbled under the demands of deadline crunch times or the financial uncertainty of freelance work. I know what you mean, I agreed, thinking of past relationships that had faltered when partners grew impatient. With my demanding schedule, or couldn't comprehend why I would obsess over seemingly minor details in a project. There's something powerful about building a life with someone who inherently understands the creative process, the highs, the lows, the weird middle-of-the-night inspirations. Our domestic contentment coincided with continued professional evolution. The Memory Collectors released to even stronger reviews than our previous film, cementing Horizon's reputation for emotionally resonant storytelling and innovative visual approaches. The animation industry took notice, with larger studios beginning to adopt elements of our character design methodology and production techniques. My personal financial situation had transformed dramatically from the struggling intern who had once shared a converted garage with roommates. The equity stake in Horizon had appreciated significantly with each successful release, and my salary reflected my leadership position. For the first time, I had not just stability, but genuine prosperity, enough to assist my parents when they decided to renovate their aging home, to invest in promising creative startups, and to establish a scholarship fund at my alma mater for animation students from rural communities. This financial security brought an unexpected emotional benefit. It neutralized the last vestiges of defensiveness I had carried about my career choice. The practical concerns that had given Uncle Richard's criticisms their sting no longer applied, allowing me to engage with family members from a position of genuine equanimity rather than suppressed resentment. During the Thanksgiving holiday, when Grace and I traveled to Michigan to visit my parents, this new equilibrium was tested by an unexpected invitation to dinner at Uncle Richard's home. He had scaled down from his previous mansion to a still impressive house in a newer development, reflecting his adjusted but still comfortable circumstances. "We don't have to go," Grace assured me when I hesitated over the invitation. Your relationship with him has improved, but that doesn't obligate you to socialize if you're not comfortable. After consideration, I decided to accept. I'm curious to see if the changes in his professional life have translated to genuine personal growth, or just surface adaptations. The evening proved revealing. Uncle Richard had indeed evolved, displaying a humility and self-awareness I wouldn't have thought possible years earlier. He asked thoughtful questions about Horizon's creative process, listened attentively to Grace's description of her illustration techniques, and spoke candidly about his own professional recalibration. Downsizing the firm was initially devastating. To my ego, he admitted over dessert. I'd built my identity around growth and expansion for so long that scaling back felt like personal failure. It took time to recognize that a smaller operation could actually produce more meaningful work and a more balanced life. This acknowledgement of vulnerability, so contrary to the infallible persona he had projected throughout my childhood, created space for authentic connection. For the first time, I glimpsed the insecurities beneath his previously domineering manner, the human struggles behind the confident facade. Melissa joined us for dessert, arriving from her studio where she had been, finalizing a presentation for a significant public project. The ease between us as cousins now stood in stark contrast to our previous polite distance, built on a foundation of genuine professional respect and shared experience navigating complex family dynamics. Dad's become almost philosophical in his old age, she teased, earning a good-natured eye roll from Uncle Richard. Next, he'll be telling you about his meditation practice and the virtues of simplifying. I wouldn't go that far, he protested, but I will say that watching the next generation succeed on their own terms has been educational. The comment, offered without his former condescension, acknowledged a fundamental shift in perspective, whether driven by his own professional setbacks, the undeniable evidence of our success, or simply the wisdom that sometimes comes with age. Uncle Richard had developed a capacity for recognizing value in paths different from his own. Driving back to my parents' house that night, Grace observed, "Family reconciliations are never quite like in movies, are they? No dramatic confessions or tearful embraces, just small moments of increased understanding, incremental shifts toward mutual respect." True, I agreed. And there's still damage that can't be undone. The years when family support was withdrawn, at a crucial time, the doubts his comments planted that I still sometimes battle. Those impacts remain even as the relationship improves. She squeezed my hand. That's part of your story now. It shaped the animator and person you've become. Someone who creates characters with depth and complexity precisely because you've experienced those contradictions yourself. The insight resonated deeply. The challenging family dynamics that had once seemed purely obstacles to overcome had actually contributed essential elements to my creative voice, an understanding of emotional nuance, an eye for unspoken truths, revealed in subtle expressions, a recognition of how people's outer presentations often conflict with inner experiences. This realization informed my approach to our third and most ambitious film under the streaming deal, Ancestors in the Walls, a multi-generational narrative exploring how family histories shape individual identities across time. The project allowed me to transform personal experience into universal storytelling, mining the complexities of my own family relationships to create characters with authentic emotional depth. Production meetings for this project took on a different quality than our previous films, with team members bringing their own family histories into conceptual discussions. The character design process became unusually personal, with animators incorporating elements of their grandparents' expressions and mannerisms into historical figures, creating a sense of lived authenticity rarely achieved in animation. This is the most emotionally invested I've seen the team, Marcus noted during a review of early animation tests. There's something powerful happening when artists draw from their own heritage to inform the work. The personal connection to the material created both extraordinary creative synergy and unexpected challenges. Team members sometimes found themselves triggered by story elements that resonated with difficult family histories. I established additional support structures, including optional discussion groups facilitated by a therapist with experience in creative industries, recognizing that mining personal experience for creative work required appropriate boundaries and processing space. As production progressed, a parallel development was unfolding in my personal life. Grace and I had purchased a Victorian-era home in a quieter San Francisco neighborhood, renovating it to include dedicated studio spaces for each of us while maintaining a clear separation between work and living areas. A lesson learned from earlier career phases when work had consumed every aspect of my existence. The house became not just our home, but a gathering place for creative colleagues, emerging artists, and friends from various disciplines. Monthly dinner parties evolved into informal salons where animators, illustrators, writers, and musicians shared works in progress and creative challenges. These gatherings nourished both our relationship and our individual creative practices, providing community and perspective beyond our immediate professional circles. My parents visited shortly after we completed renovations, my father examining the craftsmanship of the historic woodwork with professional appreciation, while my mother helped establish a small garden in the previously neglected backyard. Their comfort in our space, their pride in this tangible evidence of my established life, brought a sense of completion to a journey that had begun with their cautious support of an uncertain dream. During their visit, we received advance copies of a major animation industry publication featuring Ancestors in the Walls as its cover story. The article included an extensive interview where I discussed the film's themes of family legacy, identity formation, and the complex inheritance of both trauma and resilience across generations. "This film feels like your most personal work," the interviewer had noted. "Is that assessment accurate?" "Absolutely," I had confirmed. While all creative work draws from the artist's experience in some way, Ancestors deliberately explores how family histories, spoken and unspoken, shape who we become. The protagonist's journey to integrate contradictory family narratives reflects my own process of reconciling various influences and expectations. Reading the article together in our living room, my father looked up with an expression of quiet understanding. "You've found a way to transform difficult experiences into something meaningful for others," he observed. "That's a rare gift." His recognition of this deeper dimension of my work, beyond technical skill or commercial success, felt like the completion of a circle that had begun with his early, hesitant support of my artistic inclinations. The awkward discussions of practical concerns and career viability had evolved into appreciation for the substantive contribution my work might make to others, navigating similar challenges. Later that week, I received an unexpected email from Uncle Richard. The subject line read simply, "Article." "Nathan," he wrote, "I've read the interview about your upcoming film. Your insights about family legacy are profound and have prompted considerable reflection. While I cannot change past actions or words, I want you to know that I now understand the narrow-mindedness of my former perspective. Your work has depth and significance I failed to recognize. The fraud was never you. It was the limited lens through which I viewed creative contribution. I look forward to seeing the film when released. With respect and admiration, Richard." The acknowledgement, offered without expectation of response or absolution, represented a more complete reckoning than I had ever anticipated. It didn't erase history or heal all wounds, but it offered something perhaps more valuable: evidence that people capable of causing significant harm can, under the right circumstances, develop the awareness and humility to recognize their impact. Shared the message with Grace, who recognized its significance immediately. "Will you respond?" she asked. "I will," I decided after consideration. Not to absolve him or pretend the past didn't happen, but to acknowledge his growth and close this chapter with integrity. My reply was brief but genuine. Uncle Richard, thank you for these reflections. While our past interactions contributed to difficult periods in my development, they also ultimately strengthened my resolve and informed the artist I've become. I appreciate your willingness to reconsider previously held views and articulate that evolution. I'll make sure you receive tickets to the premiere when dates are finalized. Regards, Nathan. The exchange brought neither dramatic catharsis nor complete reconciliation, but something more realistic and sustainable, a measured peace based on mutual recognition of both historical truth and present growth. It was, perhaps, the most authentic resolution possible given our complex history. As Ancestors in the Walls moved through final production phases toward its anticipated release, I found myself increasingly reflective about the journey that had brought me to this point, from small-town dreamer to recognized industry leader, from family outcast to reconciled adult navigating complex relationships on more equal terms. The lighthouse my father had carved sat prominently on my desk at home, a daily reminder of both creative purpose and personal evolution. Its beam still symbolized guidance through difficult passages, but I had come to recognize that lighthouses serve another crucial function. They mark safe harbors, places of arrival, as well as navigation points for journeys. In many ways, I had reached such a harbor. Not a final destination, as creative growth and personal development would continue throughout life, but a place of sufficient security and self-knowledge to weather future storms with greater resilience. The fraud my uncle had once proclaimed me to be had never existed. Neither had the overnight success others later perceived. What existed instead was the most human story of all, a person finding their authentic path despite obstacles, transforming challenges into creative insight, and ultimately building connections that honored both difficult truths and possibilities for growth. That was the story worth telling. That was the light worth casting. 5 years have passed since that awards ceremony night. The golden statuette sits on a shelf in my home office, occasionally gathering dust before being absently wiped clean during a phone call or creative brainstorming session. Its significance has evolved from validation to reminder, not of achievement, but of the journey that shaped both the artist and person I've become. Horizon Animation Studios has grown into one of the industry's most respected creative forces, known for stories that blend innovative visual approaches with emotional authenticity. Our team now occupies 3 floors of a renovated industrial building in San Francisco's Arts District, where the walls display concept art from completed projects alongside the developing visions of newer team members finding their voice. My role has shifted again, from Associate Creative Director to Chief Creative Officer, and now to Creative Advisor, a position that allows me to guide Horizon's overall vision, while dedicating more time to mentoring emerging animators and developing the foundation I established for artists from unconventional backgrounds. The Reed Animation Fellowship now supports 15 young creators annually, providing not just financial assistance but studio access, professional mentorship, and industry connections. Many of our fellows come from small towns and rural communities, where creative careers seem distant possibilities rather than viable paths. Seeing them evolve from hesitant beginners to confident artists provides a satisfaction different from but equal to any professional recognition. Grace and I welcomed our second child last year, a son who already shows his sister's creative inclinations, but with his own distinctive perspective. Our home has become a place where art-making is as natural as breathing, where creative exploration is valued regardless of outcome, where mistakes are recognized as essential steps in the developmental process rather than failures to be avoided. My parents visit regularly, my father bringing new hand-carved creations for the children, my mother filling sketchbooks with observational drawings she began creating after retirement. Their late-blooming artistic pursuits remind me that creative development follows no standardized timeline. That authentic expression emerges when conditions allow, sometimes after decades of dormancy. Uncle Richard attends family gatherings. With a mellowed presence, his former domineering manner replaced by a more contemplative approach to family dynamics. We maintain a relationship built on mutual respect rather than intimate connection, a balance that honors both our history and our growth. His architectural firm, now co-led with Melissa, has found renewed purpose focusing on sustainable community projects rather than prestigious commercial developments. Melissa and I have developed a genuine friendship over the years. Our shared experience as second-generation professionals who diverged from parental expectations creating common ground despite our different fields. Her children and mine exchange birthday cards featuring architectural sketches and character designs, perhaps establishing a different kind of family creative legacy than either of our fathers might have imagined. Recently, I was invited to deliver the commencement address at California Institute of Digital Arts, the school where my journey began, returning now as evidence of possibilities rather than seeker of validation. Standing before graduating students, many facing family doubts similar to those I had encountered, I shared perspectives gained through experience. The path from creative aspiration to sustainable practice is rarely direct, I told them. It involves technical skill development, certainly, but equally important is the emotional resilience to persist when validation is scarce and doubts, external and internal, seem overwhelming. Some of you have families who fully support your creative ambitions. Cherish that gift and recognize its rarity. Others face skepticism, concern, or outright opposition from those whose approval you've valued most. That pain is real and significant. What I wish someone had told me at your stage is this: family skepticism, however painful, does not define your capabilities or predict your path. The people who doubt you most vocally are often operating from limited understanding rather than malice, from genuine concern based on outdated notions of security, from fear of unfamiliar territories they cannot navigate themselves. Your task isn't necessarily to convince them. Sometimes that happens naturally as your path unfolds. Sometimes, reconciliation remains incomplete. Your task is to build resilience that allows you to create regardless of external validation, to find alternate support systems among mentors and peers who recognize your potential, and to develop internal metrics for success beyond conventional recognition. The most meaningful achievements aren't trophies or titles, but moments of creative authenticity. When your unique vision manifests exactly as you intended, when your work resonates with others in ways that transcend explanation, when you recognize growth in your capabilities that no external validation could match. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this: the path that seems most uncertain, the one others warn against, the one that requires faith in your own creative voice, is often precisely the path that leads to your most significant contributions. Looking out at those young faces, hopeful, uncertain, ready to embark on their own complex journeys, I recognized both my former self and the countless emerging creators whose paths might intersect with mine in coming years. The desire to support their development has become as central to my identity as my own creative work, perhaps because I understand so intimately how essential support can be when conventional validation is absent. The lighthouse my father carved years ago has been joined by other symbolic objects in my studio. A framed sketch from my high school portfolio that Mrs. Calloway returned during a visit. A production still from The Lighthouse Keeper's Song, signed by the original Horizon team, a handmade card from my daughter featuring her interpretation of our family history. Together, these artifacts represent not just career milestones, but a more nuanced narrative about creativity's role in human development, how it helps us process complexity, integrate contradictory experiences, and ultimately construct meaning from the raw materials of our lives. The fraud my uncle once proclaimed to me never existed. Neither did the overnight success others later perceived. What existed instead was the most universal story of all. A person finding their authentic expression despite obstacles, transforming challenges into creative insight, and eventually extending hard-won wisdom to others traveling similar paths. If my journey offers any lesson worth sharing, perhaps it's this. The most important validation never comes from awards or accolades, from family approval or industry recognition. It comes from the quiet certainty that you have honored your creative truth, that you have persisted when persistence seemed foolish, that you have built something meaningful that couldn't have existed without your particular vision and voice. That validation, internal, unshakable, independent of external circumstances, is the true measure of success. It's the lighthouse that guides us through darkness, the beacon that remains when all other lights have failed, the steady glow that helps others find their way to shores yet undiscovered. If you found value in this story, please consider supporting young creators in your community who may be facing similar challenges. Creative persistence often depends on finding just one person who believes when others doubt, who recognizes potential before it's fully realized, who offers encouragement when conventional validation is absent. You could be that person for someone else's journey. The impact may be greater than you'll ever know. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.